All right, now we're ready to get the doors. Those are in Devon's Suburban. I carried all the tools and stuff up in my Jeep. And yeah, we've even got the screens. Ta-da! Thank God for four-wheel drive.
The installation was pretty straightforward. I made the OD of the new jamb the same size as the existing with the opening, but we had to raise it up. So we removed the existing 2x4 header, put in a new one, and then cut out the T111 siding. Next, we brought the unit in there and assembled the whole thing so we could dry fit it. I wanted to make sure that everything fit well and that we could level it and plumb it and had plenty of room for everything. Then we removed the unit from the opening and prepped that floor. It was one of the weirdest job sites I've ever worked on. I always had the feeling somebody was looking over my shoulder.
So here's the tricky part, and really the only tricky part. When you set the sill, it's got to be dead level. Now, I'm not going to put in a cant strip here like I have in other jobs and in other videos you see, so I can level the cant strip, because I'm going to use the barrier method instead. I don't want to raise that sill up off this floor any more than I have to, but I have to raise it this high on both ends just to clear this hump in the middle. And if I hadn't caught that hump, then the doors would never, ever possibly fit right. However, if I shim this like I have with this level so that these points are level and I'm clearing the hump in the floor right here, the high spot, everything will go together just slick as can be. But if I miss that, I'd be screwed.
I installed a bunch more plywood shims of varying thicknesses just to get that rough opening shimmed in nice and solid. And then I applied a really nice bed of peel and stick membrane. That way, if any moisture did get underneath that sill, the floor wouldn't rot out. And then I took a whole tube of sealant and squirted that out on top of that membrane on the outside, near flush with the outside of the wall. And by setting that new sill down into that membrane, I had a really nice sealant dam on the outer edge of the wall. The next step was just to get the top flush with the wall, with the header, and then put in fasteners 1 and 2. After that, it was swinging the doors and the side lights so that we could adjust the jamb to fit the doors. If you've watched my other videos, you know fasteners 3 and 4 can't go in until you've swung everything and corrected for cross leg. That means the bottom jamb legs may have to come in and out a little. And then, once that was done, we threw in all the rest of the fasteners and shims and applied all the exterior trim, which was pre-cut. Every single piece pre-cut and pre-finished. Then the hardware went on, the locks on the door, the casement latches on the little swinging side lights that swung in, and then the door shoes on the side lights and the door. So all the weather stripping was complete, including the Q-Lon Kerfin weather stripping on the side lights and the door. And that was the end of the first day. Actually, I think we left there about noon. It was starting to get hot. I was in a hurry to go home. Remember, I'm 70 years old. I get tired. I like going home early. So the second day we came, I did the paneling on the inside, which was kind of fun, and Devon removed all the old decking and poured footings for the new deck posts. The paneling on the inside was a little bit of a challenge because it wasn't really lined up, and I had to fool with it to get it lined up across the wall. If you look closely, you'll see some narrow strips on the left side, so I could play catch up with the right side. And then I installed a strip right there above the door that I had to rip to size. Then all the interior trim went on, which was also pre-cut, except I think I had to cut those mole battens just a little bit. They were a little bit long. And once those went on, I was able to start putting the interior trim on in the corners. And all of that stuff I'd removed, on day 1, I think, I removed all those trim pieces. And they were kind of funky. They had funny little angles that the do-it-yourselfers had used to hide all the joinery. And the last step was installing 2 little angular pieces right at those where the gambrel came down to the flat wall. Before we left that day, I made a cut through the T111 siding, snapped a good line, about 3 inches above where I thought the top of the roofing would be, so we could open up that wall and install some Z-metal flashing. That way we could stop any water from coming down the T111 and getting behind the siding at the top of the roof. And this was really tough because at this point we had the homeowner supervising us. But we still managed to get that ledger up. Once we had the ledger established, we were able to cut all the pieces for the roof. The deck posts, the 4x6 header, which I cut at a bevel so we didn't have to put seat cuts in the little rafters. And I made all the brackets too. I had to use my big DeWalt miter saw, my old 706, to cut through that full-size 4x4. It's all resawn and cut by a local mill. And we dominoed every single one of those miters together and glued them up so they'd just be solid as a rock. That was probably one of the trickiest and most important details in the patio cover roof that I designed. It's an organic crowfoot design. I first saw it on the Thorson home, Green and Greenhouse in Berkeley, California, and I saw it again recently, at least kind of an example of it, in that crowfoot arch at the Mission San Javier del Bac in Tucson, Arizona. It's much more of an organic shape than a standard angled bracket. When I say organic, I mean you feel it in your heart. I rounded over the outside corners and the inside corners with my bandsaw, just shooting for a rough cut. And then I took those pieces over to my old shopsmith and sanded each one of those radius corners until they were smooth as glass. Eased all the edges with a roundover bit, softening everything considerably. Next, I took a wire wheel on my Makita drum sander. That wire wheel is really aggressive, and it put down a nice texture. Looks almost like sandblasting, so it would match the resawn material on the rest of the patio cover. And when we went back to that job site, we were able to treat all the posts real quick, set them into the post bases, and bolt everything down immediately. Plumb in both directions. We'd even measured for the height of those posts and cut them in my shop. So when we brought them out, they were dead level across the top too and ready for the header. And then it was just a matter of piecing the decking back in, notching around the posts, and screwing down the last two deck boards before we were able to start tackling the roof. First, the girder went up, the header. All we had to do was center that. It was already dead level. I used 10-inch structural screws right through the girder and down into the 4x4 to secure the girder or the header to the 4x4 posts. And then the brackets went in. Those brackets weren't just decorative, they're structural too. They're what stopped that whole assembly from racking side to side. We first clamped those brackets to the posts in the girder, and then we ran structural screws through them. And once we had both those brackets installed, that whole truss assembly wouldn't budge a fraction of an inch. We pre-cut all those little rafters in my shop too, plumb cut for the ledger, and a plumb cut down at the tail too, and I pre-drilled every single one of those for a structural screw into the ledger. That made it real easy to climb my ladder and throw a screw right through the rafter into the ledger. Those structural screws fell right into a countersunk hole too, so they wouldn't interfere with the sheathing. And then I drove one structural screw through the tail of the rafter down into the top of that beveled beam. And after that, it was just a matter of getting the sheathing on and rolling out that underlayment as I went across, so I wouldn't have to get up there and start rolling underlayment out from underneath my feet. We finished off the sheathing pretty much lickety-split. Finished off the roof with a 12-inch wide layer of Grace's peel and stick membrane. Then we pulled the underlayment down on top of that Grace product and taped it down with zip so nothing would leak at the edge of the overhang. So you saw us on the time lapse cut into the siding here and put that piece of Z metal in behind the siding, so any moisture that comes down the siding will hit that Z metal and be guided back outside. And then we took this product from York Manufacturing, which is a copper self-adhesive flexible flashing, and we adhered that to that Z metal that we installed behind the T111. And the underlayment comes all the way up to that Z metal that we put in, and then this tucks underneath the Z metal. The first piece of the copper tucks underneath the Z metal, and then the second piece is adhered to the face of this flashing, and it adheres also to the top of the Z metal. So we're flashed in 3 different directions. And that way, the homeowner, when they bring their metal roofing up here, they'll be able to pull the release paper off the back of this flashing, because it's seriously adhesive, and then fold this right down on top of their metal roof and they'll be done. Roof will probably, except for a few little pinhole spots, it'll probably be about 99% leak proof. And I think that's about the best I'm going to accomplish with this little garden shed.